Welcome again. It's Tuesday of Holy Week. We continue these last few days of our journey through Lent. And this week we're particularly looking at a poem, getting our inspiration from a poem that was written in the Celtic saints era, and it's the Dream of the Rood being the cross. I took some time today, actually earlier in the day, to find the full-length poem, and I'll drop a connection in the description or in the comments maybe. It's Old English, so it's a little bit hard work, but even though it's Old English, you can still battle through the challenge of it, and it's quite the epic saga of Jesus going to the cross. Quite a different perspective on the whole thing, actually, and it's breathtaking. We're going to read from Mark's Gospel, and then we'll have a moment of quiet. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort. And they clothed him in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him. And they began saluting him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull, and they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he didn't take it. Always harrowing words. But it's the brutality of the whole picture. And we will look at that in a moment. Let's first of all, let's quieten our hearts, gather our scattered senses, and focus ourselves on the presence of God. Lord, open our mind, our heart, and all of our senses to experience what you have for us and to be led into all truth. Amen. First of all, Lord, we say thank you. Having read that little passage from Mark, and just a little reminder of what it is you did for us, we are overwhelmed with your love. We're blown away every time we think of the incredible act of kindness that you did. You loved the world so much that you gave yourself. Amazing. Thank you. So this poem, The Dream of the Rood, brings, as I said, quite a different perspective. Sometimes when we see depictions of Jesus heading towards the cross, then they focus very much on the physical condition that he would have been in. And of course, he would have been weak and he would have been battered. Even in the part that we just read, it talks about beatings and hitting him on the head and cursing him and spitting on him. And we know from Isaiah that he was marred. His visage was marred more than any man. So of course, physically, he was weak and he'd gone through an incredible battle, even before getting to the cross. But the way this poem depicts Jesus getting to the cross is quite different, and you can only really explain it by them focusing on the spirit rather than the physical side of him. So that spiritual capacity that he was operating in was not weak at all, not battered, not bowed, but the spiritual side of Jesus was incredibly strong. He was quite gritty and quite determined. He'd set his face as flint to go to Jerusalem in the first place. He'd spoken to the disciples about a grain of wheat falling into the ground and needing to die so that it would be completely transformed and then give life to others. And he said, even then, so what will I do? Am I going to ask God to get me out of this? No, I'm going to ask God to put his glory on display. I love it. This is what God's glory on display looks like. It looks like Jesus going to the cross, submitting himself, selflessly pouring himself out. That's God's glory on display. Our God is different to any other ruler this earth has ever seen. This is God's glory on display. So there are parts of the poem that talk about Jesus getting to the cross. It talks about him being the young hero who was hurrying with great eagerness to climb on the cross. He ascended the wretched gallows. He ascended. Great words that they're using there. He ascended the wretched gallows when he wanted to redeem mankind. There's a few other little excerpts from the poem that are probably worth just drawing out. The Rue describes how it trembled as Christ, the hero, made physical contact with it. I quivered when the hero clasped me, one translation says. And another translation of the poem says, I trembled when the hero hugged me. And the Rue goes on to say in the poem that when Jesus ascended onto him, or onto it, then it was difficult even to stand. But standing is what it did, so it did. It continued to stand. Let's just spend a moment contemplating the cross one more time. And we're going to keep doing it a few more times before the end of this week, of course. But today we're thinking particularly about the eagerness that Christ had in approaching the cross. Is that how you think about Jesus going to the cross? With a sense of eagerness, with a sense of the end in mind, wanting to save humanity and redeem us, restore us into relationship with God? Can you even picture Jesus as ascending onto the cross, hugging the cross, clasping the cross, and taking to his place in the battle quickly? Let's spend just 30 seconds thinking about these things. King of the universe, Lord of all things, thank you that you went to the cross for me, but also to save everything from the clasp of sin. Thank you that you approached this knowing the joy set before you, and went with an eager heart, the weak in body. Raise my spirit to step into the trials I face with that same heart. Amen. Amen. See you tomorrow.